Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Pronago. Welcome to Reclamation of Aiur's review. I was not really expecting to have much to say on this campaign. Generally speaking, when I started it, I thought it would be a little bit different. I actually remembered a campaign that was actually set on Aiur, for example. I don't think we got that here. If I'm not mistaken, actually, most of the campaign is set on, well, I guess most of it is like on Braxis, fighting the UED for some reason. And then before that, it's like fighting Zerg on Shakuras. So, is there even any Aiur besides the opening cutscene? Probably not. That didn't stop Sharandar in 1999 from designing this masterpiece of antiquity. And essentially, this campaign serves as one of those like mediocre, I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing with AI scripts, because nobody did back then, sort of macro-focused campaigns, which I am appreciative of, although it's not without its turns for the worse, where you will get these random gimmicks that just spawn out of nowhere. I don't know how they got there. It's weird. Like the whole, don't destroy enemy buildings thing. Very reminiscent of like StarCraft 2 type stuff, although thankfully, unlike after Brood War, I think there's not too many similarities with StarCraft 2. I mean, it includes UED, so that completely removes it from being compared with StarCraft 2 almost immediately, right? Although I guess so did after Brood War, and that didn't stop it from copy-pasting all of the plot points. Very, very strange. A very strange life we lead here on the Brood War custom content community. So I'm going to take a brief look at my playlist here for this particular production. Just draw some inspiration from some of the video titles, some of the mission titles, sort of remembering how I felt. And I think that Reclamation of Aiur is just one of those very bizarre campaigns that, it starts out relatively goofy, but at the same time grounded in that old school kind of vibe of just playing a StarCraft campaign that's very much user-made, very much low budget. It has some voice acting, which obviously puts it leagues above a lot of the other, competition, as it were, because of the fact that I don't have to sit there reading. Although I did have to do that, I think at the opening and the closing of the campaign, there was some text that was actually related to the plot that was not narrated or voice acted. So obviously, that goes against it in my little black book of things not to do. That's definitely in there somewhere. I don't know exactly where in the order, in priority, but very strange, very bizarre production overall. I definitely think that if this campaign had tried to be a bit more grandiose with its early macro missions, I would be a lot more favorable to it when it eventually and inevitably succumbed to the micro mission that is Infiltration, the basically what it is a micro mission in the fourth mission, Into the Fray, but also to hold the breach, the third mission. That was another micro mission, right? Because for some reason we weren't allowed to use, probes, and it's just very bizarre. Like even the viewers who are more like casual followers of this sort of thing, as casual as one can be when it comes to custom content for a really old game, they're like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, is there a trigger broken or something? And it didn't help that I had to actually manually fix, I think, the second map, Resilience. Very, very silly. So aside from the obvious, like, massive, blatant pitfalls, which are, like, the cutscene in the end of The Upper Hand not working, which is the seventh mission, essentially the final playable mission, as well as the opening of Resilience not working, and I'm not sure if those are issues with the fact that this game was made for, like, version 1.0 or 1.1 or whatever for StarCraft, and we're playing it on 1.16.1, a much later version. What should have been the final version? I would say the definitive version of the game. And we get to a position where, it's kind of squirrely. You have to figure out, like, all right, is this really something I can fault the developer for? Is this really the result of nobody playtesting it? Because I feel like, besides the bunker issue, which is obviously like, why would anybody put their hero in a bunker? Oh, I don't know, maybe because they're not useful. See, you're fighting Zerg with a ghost hero. It's useful against mutas initially, and then you realize, well, none of these AI really build mutas. They just build hydras and queens. Fuck those queens, man. And so, yeah, you just stick them in the fucking bunker. Maybe you use the Goliath hero, but I feel like he got focused down a lot more than I would like. He took more damage than I was expecting for a Goliath hero. I'm not really sure why. But that was also a mission where, for bizarre reasons, we just had modified tanks that couldn't go into siege mode for, I don't know why, because the guy wanted you to have some artillery. It's just bizarre. So I feel like there's just a level of discontent with, like, the basic sort of StarCraft formula, and there's a disconnect between playing the early missions, which don't really have that many gimmicks, if any, like Aftermath and Resilience, seem relatively I'm not going to say well polished, obviously, but they seem relatively complete and vanilla in that sense, right? I guess Resilience, besides like the opening issue where you're fixing the map yourself, which I assume, that's like literally watching your map for more than 10 seconds, like launching your map and staying in the game for more than 10 seconds. I assume that that's not an issue that was in the original version and somehow one way or another got desynced by versions. And I would imagine that the same thing, besides the bunker thing in the upper hand, is also true. And so unfortunately I was not able to get that on tape, but I showed you guys what was going on there anyway, so no big deal there. But I do just feel like, overall, you look at Resilience, and you look at Aftermath, and these are like very basic missions in terms of their premise, in terms of what they offer to the player. So they don't really, grab you by the balls and bring you into the clown room immediately. It's like there's a gradual morphing. You boil a frog emoji in water until it turns into a clown. You got to do it slowly. It's a very slow boil initially, at least you think. But then the Breach, the third mission, is just a micro mission where you have bases but can't use them because no probes. Even though you don't have money, right? But you have so many mineral fields there, and you can't build anymore because I guess you don't have any in the bank. Like, I don't understand that at all, man. That's so goofy. It's just so strange to me that was like there was no real justification. It was just a line that said we cannot warp in anymore. It's like, okay, I guess you can't. That's it. You did it. You've convinced me. It's very strange there. And then you have a situation where, besides that, you go through and you try to experience the actual gameplay that is supposedly there, and half of the mission is you just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for something to happen. And that's when you realize that you're in a pot of boiling water and your green skin is starting to emulsify? I don't even know what the word is for that. Basically, you're going through a Michael Jackson phase where you're becoming white and you're not sure why, and then you look in the mirror and you're a clown! And that's when you play the fourth mission, Into the Fray, and you realize that you're not allowed to destroy enemy buildings of a certain color. Well, I guess that's very diverse, but I would prefer to be able to destroy everybody equally, Not really like a Hitlerian kind of guy. So then, of course, there's Infiltration, the micro mission, which seemed to rely a lot on... I don't understand why you didn't get mind control in that mission. Like, I would have preferred if the previous mission involved you, like, infiltrating, yes, a Terran compound, not a command center, because the command centers are really not nearly as big as that mission makes it out to seem like, And basically, I would have far preferred if you had the multiple Dark Archons there, and it was really about like unshackling the Dark Archon in some way to make it so that you were mostly using those to change the game. Because I concede that people are going to make micro missions even though they shouldn't. Part of it is Blizzard's fault because they made micro missions in their own campaigns, and part of it is just because some people find that stuff actually enjoyable. And I always say, above everything else that I say in my reviews or my analysis, design to your own taste. And if you like micro missions, then who am I to tell you not to make them, besides somebody who personally doesn't like them myself? So I'm not going to sit here and try to justify other people not making micro missions, because that may very well be what they think is best for that particular reason. It's when you get into a position where I'm doing it because Blizzard did it. Well, I think you should have more of a justification for that, even for your macro missions. Like, why bother making macro missions just because Blizzard did it? No, you got to figure out, like, what is the justification for making anything in Brood War? You shouldn't just copy Blizzard, because, it's fine to emulate Blizzard if you want to try to get up to their level of map making, which, admittedly, everybody who's above that rightfully sneers at that sentiment, like, oh, Blizzard's level of map making? You mean non-existent? But, a lot of people are coming from less than nothing, I guess, if you were going to use that as your baseline. And so using Blizzard as an example to try to get up to their level is perfectly reasonable. You want to emulate, you want to make a bunch of experiments, but a lot of the times, especially younger creators, will get attached to an idea and think it's the best idea that they're ever going to have, or, I guess it's not necessarily like if you paint it in those lights, when you say, oh, what do you think this is the best idea you're ever going to have? If you ask them that question, they'll probably say no. I guess not. But they don't think about it in that immediate moment. Right? They're thinking, this is the idea that I'm really invested in. I really have an excitement, a drive, some sort of motivation that's motivating me to and inspiring me to work on this particular idea and try to bring it to fruition. And I want to make it the best it can be. But, there are other levels of expression in terms of making maps, designing, writing dialogue, for example. You might have a really good idea for a story or a character arc or something like that, but maybe you can't write dialogue to properly express it. Maybe you can't design gameplay to properly support it. Who knows? So there could be any number of other issues. And that's why I think you see a lot of younger map makers who will make one campaign and then struggle for a while to make their second or their third or whatever. And, either they won't see a lot of improvement between their first initial set of releases and their next set, or they'll see a really long swath of time between their initial releases and their future releases because they realize, oh, actually, it's probably better if I just experiment with a bunch of like side stuff that I don't care that much about compared to my really epic ideas that I want to do as well as I can. Although I guess there is something to be said about just trying to make, do the best you have with the hands that you're dealt or whatever, something like that. I guess that makes sense in any context, probably. Nonetheless, this whole rant about like developer motivations has its place in Reclamation of Aiur because, again, Infiltration is a mission where you walking around with the Dark Archon and a Zeratul clone, and you're some Protoss units, and then you rescue some Terran units, but a lot of the Terran units you attack, and there's not really any justification as to why. I mean, this is a voice-acted campaign. You'd think there would be some dialogue that's like, Selgas is like, I really don't feel like... I think that was his name. I don't remember. I assume it's the Dark Templar hero. He's like, I don't really think it's a good idea to slaughter these Terrans, but I guess we have to if we must. Let's try to avoid doing it, though. And then maybe you can like redirect them or mind control them with your Dark Archon that you brought. Painstakingly managed to squeeze into the fucking command center as other bunkers were shooting it, which is very realistic. Anyways, so a whole host of realism and immersion problems aside, I feel like this mission's identity really should have revolved around using a cloaked unit and a Dark Archon or something like that, and really having some interesting puzzle-based gameplay around that. Because if you're gonna, remove macro and make it a micro mission, then go whole hog and actually make it something like that is a memorable experience that is sufficiently removed from conventional micro missions, but also conventional macro missions, so that you stand out amongst the rank and file. But instead, the only reason this stands out is because I feel like there's nothing going on. Like there's a lot of just moving around and a-moving, and then you realize maybe I should have a-moved a little bit more intelligently, and then you get medics and it's all over. So at that point, you can just a-move with zealots, and you don't have Dragoon range for some reason, which is very strange. So that's sort of where I'm at with the concept of Infiltration as a mission. And of course, as a micro mission, I felt like, it was just a generic micro mission for the sake of having a micro mission. It didn't feel like the concept, which could have been executed better than it was executed to any degree of competency to the point where it justifies including the mission to begin with. And I would say the same thing about a lot of the macro missions anyways, right? Because it's not that it fails just because it's a micro mission. I think that's part of why it fails, but it also fails because it fails to deliver a satisfying concept on what defined it, which is having a hero Dark Templar and a regular Dark Archon, and the whole idea being that you're supposed to mind control Terrans and convince them to join your side, and then you never do that anyway. So what the fuck was the point of even keeping the Dark Archon alive, you may ask? I don't know. Because there's a defeat trigger in the map, I guess. That's basically the only justification I can think of. And so then in, ignoring the UED commander flip-flop at the end where he's just like, I can't believe you've destroyed half of my, my station and half of my men, and also let the Zerg destroy the other half, but I guess I'll help you. And then you get that New Allies mission, which is so at odds with the upper hand, not just because you start out with so much junk in New Allies, which is the 6th mission, by the way. The mission where I played it with nukes and battlecruisers because I managed to accidentally ignore the conditions for the trigger that activates the AI. So that was really psychotic too. And so you see nukes, you see battlecruisers. Is certainly a mission like it's like Terran porn for those of you who are really interested in jacking it to StarCraft gameplay while a guy on the internet talks to you in a non-ASMR tone. So I guess I provided a service there anyways. Give me that sweet, sweet ad revenue. So, I don't know, there's really not a whole lot else to say at this point. I feel like we've really summed everything up. Like, the reason why New Allies is so at odds with the upper hand is because, not just because you start out with so much junk, but you have access to basically the entire tech tree. I don't think there's a single thing that you have disabled. You have access to a bunch of stuff that's just researched for you or upgraded for you on the spot for some reason. And then, to top it all off, the UED commander character is like this is all we have left. Not much in that mission. But then in the next mission is so confident that he'll be able to do anything that's necessary that the Protoss ask him to do. And I just don't get it. Like, that's the point where your arsenal is like spread thin somehow, and you don't have access to conventional tanks. And you don't have access to battle cruisers or you can't build a single thing from the starport. And it's like, okay, well, this is for whatever reason, this is the penultimate mission, or the ultimate mission, I guess I should say. It's the final mission. And I don't like, you have access to way less stuff than you did in New Allies, and you're up against way more Zerg. And so like the odds are actually a lot, like this is a harder mission than the previous one, but not for reasons where it's like the AI are getting better at fighting you, or the stakes are increasing that way. Like it's partially that because there's more AI on the field, right? But it's also the fact that you have like way less tools to fight back against them. You don't have conventional siege tanks. You're getting ensnared 24/7 after a certain point because they're all running the same AI script as far as I could tell. Or maybe some of them were like, one of them was insane and a couple of them were hard or medium or something. And yeah, it's just really weird to me that was the identity that Sharandar decided to go for with the upper hand. Now, again, it's 1999 we're talking about. Not very many people know about AI. Basically they're just like running it and hoping it works. And as you could see from the triggers that I described in the cutscene, where you have fucking a kill unit trigger for the hero, and then spawn broodlings on him using the create unit at location trigger. Like that's insane to me that you just, oh yeah, I moved a queen here and played a sound effect and then moved him away. Like, what kind of psychotic movie map nonsense is this? This is like something you would see in one of those role play maps or something. Or like there's this classic art custom map for Brood War that I used to play so often. It was like Movie Maker or Movie Studio, Movie Contest. That's it. Movie Contest. Dude, that was the shit. If you were like 12 years old and you were just trying to like tell some stupid jokes to some of your friends or some people who you hoped would become your friends because you told really stupid jokes that you probably stole from somebody else who you saw used it earlier, then that map was the shit. And I found out there was like a Warcraft 3 version, but it was way more complicated, so I didn't get into it. But the fucking StarCraft 1 one, holy shit. You had to like write out your dialogue really quickly. And so like some people would write it beforehand, but you can't copy paste at this stage of StarCraft. And so like that was really silly. Oh man, the memories are flooding back now. But yeah, speaking of memories, like I said, I remembered a very different campaign that was actually set on Aiur. And maybe that's like Resurgence or something. Is another RE campaign. Like it started out with RE. I'm almost certain of it. I want to see where we are with that. Because if I can find that, I see Return of the Zerg. That could have been it. No, not the Revengers. Retaking of Ilion, no. Yeah, there is a campaign called Resurgence. And I would say that that's probably the one that I'm looking for, actually. So maybe we'll play that soon, because that is a campaign that I thought I was getting with this. But I knew I was getting the really silly Terran-sounding voice acting, although I did say that the Zealot hero, who I forget, not Keldan, that's the Templar, Tassadar clone. There's a Zealot hero, Danis. Yes, Anus Man. This campaign really likes anuses. So the Zealot hero actually has more than, I would say, middling voice acting. Like, obviously a little rough around the edges, not very emotive, but the processing was tolerable, and that made it way better than all of the other processing, I think. Although, admittedly, I don't think there really was any processing for the Terran characters, besides like the occasional Goliath beep in the back of Peter Parker's transmissions. But the UED Commander voice acting was like so insanely, like it was pitch shifted down really noticeably, and it's like, it was very embarrassing. Like it reminded me of when I was like pitch shifting down my Terran voice acting when I was like 15 years old, and I was like trying to be a gruff military warrior, and I was like, I can't do the voice. I'm not a teenager, by the way. And then I would just pitch shift that down. So like that was just psychotic. So I don't know what to say about that. Like that, it definitely like made me cringe at my own memories more so than at itself. But I guess you couldn't say that I was cringing at it. So there's like very hit or miss, I would say. And some of the voices are just hard to hear too in some cases. I felt like it did an okay job. Like it was an unabashed attempt at making a low budget, voice acted campaign, right? A low budget in a proverbial sense, because of course most campaigns don't have any budget, right? Yeah, they're just, if you're doing things right, you're not paying anybody. You're just doing this for fun, right? So yeah, I mean, really, I would say that this is a very hit or miss campaign, with most of it being missed. It was weird because I thought we were on track for like a relatively solid production in the first two missions. And then I guess sort of like, what's that campaign? I mentioned it earlier. After Brood War, much like that campaign, after a while it just went off the fucking deep end. Presumably because like it feels like the map makers just get bored of like making conventional missions, and then they're like, oh, I gotta add some gimmicks. And then Metathrom said, "Hold my beer," and then reminded us that he is owed it. Oh yeah, what a fucking disaster. Anyways, that's really my recommendation on Reclamation of Aiur. Is like it's sort of similar to After Brood War. I guess it's a little bit. It's shorter by a country mile, and there was in fact no finished continuation of the production that I can see. Sharondar only shows up as the author of this campaign, so unless we just aren't familiar with the second half, I don't like. If somebody knows where it is or something, if knows anything about it, feel free to comment about it or reach out to me directly. But outside of that, I'm assuming that this is a done deal and we've completed it. And I guess I'm disappointed that the second half never came out, because I would like a more you play for a number of hours somebody else's story. You want to see how it ends, even if you're not like super invested in the production overall. And yeah, kind of frustrating there. But besides that, I mean, I guess because it's much shorter and I guess a bit more functional in terms of its AI, although not very functional in terms of the triggering. Like, that's the problem, is like you can abuse it or sometimes it'll just break. I did upload my fixed version of map 2 and the 161 EXE to the mega archive that's linked in all of the videos. So if you want to try that out, like, you can. The only issue is, of course, map 7 still has that bugged outro. Somebody might be able to make it work again. I just didn't want to replay the whole mission because that seemed like psychotic. But I guess what would probably fix that is I guess you would have to like kill the bunker that is like center a location on him and kill the bunker that he's in. Or maybe removing bunkers doesn't remove the units in them. I'm not 100% sure. But like the technical specifics don't matter. It's just bugged right now if you stick him in the bunker. So just make sure to unload him or don't put him in a bunker if you do intend to replay that mission, just to see the ending in its full anime movie contest-esque glory. So that's basically all I have to say on this overarching ordeal. It was an okay campaign. It was okay. Just okay. It was much worse than okay for like what an objective standard would be, but based on the other campaigns that I play lately, it was a bit more tolerable, I guess, probably just because it had voice acting. I think that really carried it. That really does a lot to alleviate my personal stress and annoyance levels when playing a campaign, although the micro missions really got my blood boiling at a few places as well. But yeah, generally speaking, I guess I can recommend this campaign to people who are interested in, again, voice acted campaigns, campaigns that start out strong and then fucking go nowhere, and strong being a relative term, of course, because a lot of the early missions are really fucked up in some ways. But at the very least, map 2's fixed, and maybe we'll get a fixed version of map 7 if some mapper wants to open it up and crack that code, because that's more of an issue of the ending as opposed to the beginning. So it's a lot harder to test reliably, as you guys noticed when I was trying to debug it myself in the video. So that's where we'll leave it. It's if you're interested in less shitty campaigns than your average campaign, I guess Reclamation of Aiur could fit that bill. Depends on what you want.